Hello, I'm Valerie Reid, and tonight I'm going to read a big part of chapter 27 from a classic, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, the American classic about a young girl's coming of age at the turn of the century. I'm going to read you a little bit from the back because I couldn't say it better. If you miss A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, you will deny yourself a rich experience. It is a poignant and deeply understanding story of childhood and family relationships. The Nolans lived in the Williamsburg slums of Brooklyn from 1902 until 1919. Their daughter, Francie, and their son, Neely, knew more than their fair share of the privations and sufferings that are the lot of a great city's poor. Primarily, this is Francie's book, and it is largely autobiographical. She is a superb feat of characterization, an imaginative, alert, resourceful child, and Francie's growing up and beginnings of wisdom are the substance of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And I want to read to you a little bit about its reception when it came out in 1943. During World War II, American publishers produced the armed services editions of books to be sent to soldiers fighting overseas. Hundreds of works ended up in the hands and hearts of servicemen, but reportedly the most popular book of all seems to have been A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Two movies were made of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Betty Smith, in case I didn't mention the author, Betty Smith is the author. She was born in 1896, and as I said, the story is largely hers. She was 37 when the book was published, and here's part of chapter 27. It was in the same week that Francie told another great lie. Aunt Evie brought over 2 tickets. Some Protestant organization was giving a celebration for the poor of all faiths. There would be a decorated Christmas tree on the stage, a Christmas play, carols singing, and a gift for each child. Katie, her mother, couldn't see it. Catholic children at a Protestant party? Evie urged tolerance. Mama finally gave in, and Francie and Neely went to the party. Francie's 11, Neely is 10. It was in a large auditorium. The boys sat on one side and the girls on the other. The celebration was fine, except that the play was religious and dull. After the play, church ladies went down the aisle and gave each child a gift. All the girls got checkerboards and all the boys got lotto games. After a little more singing, a lady came out on the stage and announced a special surprise. The surprise was a lovely little girl, exquisitely dressed, who came from the wings carrying a beautiful doll. The doll was a foot high. It had real yellow hair and blue eyes that opened and shut with real eyelashes. The lady led the child forward and made a speech. "This little girl is named Mary." Little Mary smiled and bowed. The little girls in the audience smiled up at her, and some of the boys who were approaching adolescence whistled shrilly. "Mary's mother bought this doll and had clothes made for it, just like the clothes little Mary is wearing." Little Mary stepped forward and held the doll high in the air. Then she let the lady hold it while she spread her skirt and made a curtsy. It was true, saw Francie. The doll's lace-trimmed blue silk dress, pink hair bow, black patent leather slippers, and white silk stockings duplicated exactly the clothes of the beautiful Mary. "Now," said the lady, "this doll is named Mary after the kind little girl who is giving her away." Again, the little girl smiled graciously. "Mary wants to give the doll to some poor little girl in the audience who is named Mary." Like wind on growing corn, a rippling murmur came from all the little girls in the audience. "Is there any poor little girl in the audience named Mary?" There was a hush. There were at least 100 Marys in that audience. It was that adjective, poor, that struck them dumb. No Mary would stand up, no matter how much she wanted the doll, and be a symbol of all the poor little girls in the audience. They began whispering to each other that they weren't poor and had better dolls home and better clothes than that girl too, only they didn't feel like wearing them. Francie sat numb, longing for that doll with all her soul. "What?" said the lady. "No Marys?" She waited and made her announcement again. No response. She spoke regretfully. "Too bad there are no Marys. Little Mary will have to take the doll home again." The little girl smiled and bowed and turned to leave the stage with the doll. Francie couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand it. It was like when the teacher was going to throw the pumpkin pie in the wastebasket. She stood up and held her hand high in the air. The lady saw it and stopped the little girl from leaving the stage. "Ah, we do have a Mary, a very bashful Mary, but a Mary just the same. Come right up on the stage, Mary." Feverish with embarrassment, Francie walked up the long aisle onto the stage. She stumbled on the steps and all the girls snickered and the boys guffawed. "What is your name?" asked the lady. "Mary Frances Nolan," whispered Francie. "Louder and look at the audience." Miserably, Francie faced the audience and said loudly, "Mary Frances Nolan." All the faces looked like bloated balloons on thick strings. She thought that if she kept on looking, the faces would float away up to the ceiling. The beautiful girl came forward and put the doll in Francie's arms. Francie's arms took a natural curve around it. It was as if her arms had waited and grown just for that doll. The beautiful Mary extended her hand for Francie to shake. In spite of embarrassment and confusion, Francie noticed the delicate white hand with the tracery of pale blue veins and the oval nails that glowed like delicate pink seashells. The lady talked as Francie backed awkwardly to her seat. She said, "You have all seen an example of the true Christmas spirit. Little Mary is a very rich little girl and received many beautiful dolls for Christmas. But she was not selfish. She wanted to make some poor little Mary, who is not as fortunate as herself, happy. So she gave the doll to that poor little girl who is named Mary too." Francie's eyes smarted with hot tears. "Why can't they," she thought bitterly, "just give the doll away without saying I am poor and she is rich? Why couldn't they just give it away without all the talking about it?" That was not all of Francie's shame. As she walked down the aisle, the girls leaned towards her and whispered hissingly, "Beggar, beggar, beggar." It was beggar, beggar, beggar all the way down the aisle. Those girls felt richer than Francie. They were as poor as she, but they had something she lacked: pride. And Francie knew it. She had no compunctions about the lie and getting the doll under false pretenses. She was paying for the lie and for the doll by giving up her pride. She remembered the teacher who had told her to write her lies instead of speaking them. Maybe she shouldn't have gone up for the doll, but should have written a story about it instead. But no, having the doll was better than any story about having a doll. When they stood to sing the Star-Spangled Banner in closing, Francie put her face down close to the doll's face. There was the cool, delicate smell of painted china, the wonderful, unforgettable smell of a doll's hair, the heavenly feel of new gauze doll's clothes. The doll's real eyelashes touched her cheek and she trembled in ecstasy. The children were singing, "O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Francie held one of the doll's tiny hands tightly. A nerve in her thumb throbbed, and she thought the doll's hand twitched. She almost believed the doll was real. She told Mama that the doll had been given to her as a prize. She dared not tell the truth. Mama hated anything that smacked of charity, and if she knew, she'd throw the doll away. Neely didn't snitch on her. Francie now owned the doll, but had yet another lie on her soul. That afternoon, she wrote a story about a little girl who wanted a doll so much that she was willing to give over her immortal soul to purgatory for eternity if she could have the doll. It was a strong story, but when Francie read it over, she thought, well, that's all right for the girl in the story, but it doesn't make me feel any better. She thought of the confession she would have to make the next Saturday. She resolved that no matter what penance Father gave her, she would triple it voluntarily. Still, she felt no better. Then she remembered something. Maybe she could make the lie a truth. She knew that when Catholic children received confirmation, they were expected to take some saint's name for a middle name. What a simple solution! She would take the name of Mary when she was confirmed. That night, after the page from the Bible and the page from Shakespeare had been read, Francie consulted Mama. Mama, when I make my confirmation, can I take Mary for a middle name? No. Francie's heart sunk. Why? Because when you were christened, you were named Francie after Andy's girl. I know, but you were also named Mary after my mother. Your real name is Mary Frances Nolan. Francie took the doll to bed with her. She lay very still so as not to disturb it. She woke up from time to time in the night and whispered, Mary, and touched the doll's infinitesimal slipper with a light finger. She trembled at feeling the thin, soft bit of smooth leather. It was to be her first and her last doll.